Hey guys, Randy Potato here, and today we'll be ranking all the hero paths in Darkest Dungeon 2. The lower categories I have are all relative to the base Wanderer. We have downgrade, side grade, upgrade, and then the Great Tire for all around powerful paths, and the Please Nerf Tire for hero paths that are stupidly strong with little to no downside. Paths in the same tire are ranked left to right. First up, we have the Plague Doctor, Alchemist. With this path, you heavily sacrifice health, along with a strong boost to Blight Chance, increased crit chance on blight attacks, further increasing net blight damage. To balance the HP loss, she gets a big boost to dot resist. Overall, this is a solid upgrade path that turns a utility hero into a powerful scaling damage dealer. The HP loss is quite painful, especially in the Act 2 boss fight, which is what keeps Alchemist out of the top categories. Next is Surgeon, which doubles incision damage and boosts HP and healing given, while nerfing blight chance. This is a ridiculously overpowered path, with 3 significant upsides, and no real downside, which is an auto-include in every party and has no business existing. Objectively the best path in the game and in desperate need of a nerf. Physician is the utility path, giving Disorienting Blast a Vuln application and stun chance. Ounce of Prevention gets small AoE stress resist chance. Vapors gets a second strength token, all in exchange for a steep loss and dot damage. Vapors and Ounce are still unimpressive, but Blast becomes extremely powerful with this path. I rate this as side grade, because her main utility healing still works the same. Obviously, losing dot damage rules her out as a damage dealer, but is still sufficient for death checks, so while her upside is fairly weak, the nerfs are not too bad either. Next is Grave Robber Deadeye, a simple but deadly ranged buff in exchange for melee nerf, along with a small crit boost and move resist elimination. With the strength of Pirouette and the utility of Dagger and Darts, you don't miss the melee damage at all, making this a significant straight upgrade for the Grave Robber. The move resist can be obnoxious in certain teams, but otherwise there are no real downsides here. I put it behind Alchemist because she still doesn't have as much utility and scaling potential as Plague Doctor. Nightsworn gets a scary HP nerf, making an already fragile character even more fragile, in exchange for a big damage boost for her premier damage attacks, Pirouette and Lunge, with a further boost when she's stealthed, one of her primary mechanics. With her already high max damage and crit chance, this further boost to her 2 strongest abilities make this a strong path, even with the HP loss. If you can pick up some further damage or stealth trinkets, this can make her right at the top of all damage paths in the game. If you're scared of the HP, you can play her in my preferred strategy in the back, with an immobilized trophy spamming Lunge. This is firmly in the great category and not nerf, primarily because of the HP, but also the reliance on crit RNG. Venom Drop. Far and away the worst path in the game. You lose range damage and speed, and get a small blight on flashing daggers, arguably the worst attack in the game. You can also gain very small blight if stealthed, an absurdly high requirement for such a tiny benefit. Entirely unpickable unless you want to try it for the challenge. Obvious downgrade. Next we have Highwayman Rogue. This path gives Dismas plus 50% damage in rank 1, and half damage in the back 2 ranks, along with a single riposte on point blank shot. Given the high base damage on point blank and Wicked Slice, I put this path right in the great category, above Nightsworn. Outside of Shuffle, you should never be in the back 2 ranks with this path, which makes the downside negligible. With the Immobilized trophy, you can lock in the benefits for good. Sharpshot is the range specialist, giving plus 50% range damage for half melee damage. In addition, you get plus 3 speed, and Grape Shot Blast now gives a strength token. I put this slightly above Rogue because even without melee available, this path has a lot more diversity and is superior against the Psy, along with being more consistent without Immobilize. With 8 base speed, you activate trinkets like Swig without buffs or trinkets, and the general speed allows you to open PBS before enemy turns. Grape Shot is a Psy strategy, as the upgrade with strength and crit or wounding words allows you to deflate a lung while nuking the boss. The only real downside is losing flexibility against Deacon without melee damage. Yellow Hand is a strange path that mostly upgrades utility without needing mastery. You can steal a token with Highway Robbery unupgraded, remove a block with Double Cross, and all your melee attacks debuff bleed resist. You gain a bit of HP while having your range damage nuked. I sort of begrudgingly put this in downgrade because losing access to point blank makes me prefer Wanderer in a large amount of cases, and the benefits except for HP become irrelevant with full mastery. It's probably a slight upgrade in Act 1, and the downsides can be mitigated in lots of comps. Berserker is Hellions' bleed-based path. It's a disgusting, pure downgrade because Bleed Hellion is entirely irrelevant, especially against the Act 2 boss. For some reason, this path gets your HP, and in return gives you Deathblow resist, which is irrelevant once you get your relationships sorted, and also nerfs the variety of self-heals she has. You also gain a boost to bleed chance and crit on bleed attacks. There are a variety of problems with Bleed Hellion. Bleed Out and If It Bleeds can't be used together because of positioning. If It Bleeds in general does garbage total damage compared to Hellion's real moves, and Bleed Out is worthless against the Psy, and the Winter token is stupid because the move itself isn't spectacular, and you'd rather have raw damage. This is always worse than Wanderer, and mostly unpickable with the variety of frontliners available. I put it right above Venom drop. Carcass is at least Red Hook trying to be unique. Unfortunately, while tanks are valued in this game, a pure tank that does little else is usually not. I put this in downgrade behind Yellowhand, but above Berserker, because it at least has a use case. The main mechanic is you constantly gain winded, and those tokens generate block for you. In addition, it makes Barbaric Yop usable by making it a taunt ability. Unfortunately, Yop still has a cooldown, making it worse than other taunt moves like Retribution or Intimidate. Her other taunt move removes her winded, which conflicts with her block generation. It's only pickable with 3 pure damage dealers, but even then I'd rather have any Man-at-Arms because Bolster is superior, and even a weak Retribution is better because it can at least check Death's Door. Finally, we have Ravager, a stupidly overpowered path. You get a ridiculous 50% damage in rank 1, and also a massive HP boost that makes this elite damage dealer into a tank. The only actual downside is a chance to bleed every turn, which is made mostly irrelevant with the max HP and Adrenaline Rush, and also can boost your damage even higher with a trinket like Empty Stein. Not much else to say. Howling End nukes everything in its path, no real downsides, boring path in need of a nerf. It's right behind Surgeon because of Plague Doctor's heals, and no cooldowns or debuffs associated with Incision in comparison to Howl. Next is Intermezzo Jester. This is a unique buff-based path. Any song-based skill can cause a bleed, both friend and foe. The main buff here is Play Out and Battle Ballad gain a guaranteed positive token on top of the one the skill provides. Echoing March also applies a continuous bleed on an enemy, but still isn't good enough to use. This path is definitely a pure upgrade, but doesn't do enough to be great. I put it between Alchemist and Deadeye. Soloist is Jester's damage path. You lose HP and speed, and in exchange get a big damage buff, along with bleed chance and crit with bleed attacks. The speed is mostly irrelevant with Jester's self-speed and daze mechanics, and is actually a benefit for getting the combo off on Finale most of the time. The HP is spooky, but the fat Finale potential lets this path slip into the great category on the end. The bleed can be cool too, but is mostly cast aside by Finale. Virtuoso gives Jester HP and speed, along with a chance to add stress resist to the party. You lose most of your dot resist, which is spooky because even with the HP buff, the Jester can be fragile. The speed is incredible for getting buffs and encores off early, but otherwise this path is kinda boring. Clear upgrade, I put it between Alchemist and Intermezzo. I put it above Intermezzo because the chance at party stress resist is quite strong. Monarch Leper is widely seen as the escort mission of DD2, but I believe it's much more than that. The main mechanic is you lose HP and chop damage, but get a major boost against cosmic enemies, which include cultists, the Act Boss, and the Shambler. Purge and Intimidate also gain Vuln application. With the new cultist enemies and the mandatory Guardian fights, this is fairly useful, although the gain is not quite big enough in my opinion. Notably, you only lose chop damage, so you can still spam Hue for damage, along with your buffed Purge and Intimidate. It's a clear upgrade since it provides a buff against the toughest fights in the game, and Intimidate becomes an even more elite skill. But I put it down between Intermezzo and Deadeye because the buffs are not quite big enough compared to all the fights you have to do nerfed. Poet Leper is a strange one. You lose damage, but your Solemnity now guarantees a full heal, along with guaranteed chance to block, stun, and move. The problem here is stun and move resist are almost always irrelevant, and Solemnity has a low use limit. For me, it was a toss-up between side grade and downgrade, but I chose to put it at the top of downgrade because it doesn't come with any extra taunt or sustain that you'd expect from a sort of tank build. Disappointing and boring path. Tempest Leper is the Chop Chad. You get a 50% boost to your chop damage, debuff resist, disease block, at the cost of major HP and speed. This is obviously a pure damage path, and the debuff resist makes Tempest less reliant on combo to get hits. A very strong upgrade. The reason I keep it out of grade is because Chop still has such a wide damage range, which makes him less consistent, combined with his low crit. The HP loss is fine for the most part because of his high base HP and Solemnity, but makes him want to tank alongside him probably. Bulwark Man-at-Arms is a renamed, reworked shield-based path. You lose half damage on Crush and Riposte, but gain 50% for Rampart and Hold the Line, along with a small stun chance boost and taunt with Standfast. The problem here is Rampart Hold for Crush Riposte is not an even trade by any stretch. The utility for Crush and Riposte is just far superior, along with raw damage. And you need upgrades and combo to utilize the stun boost. Standfast is a poor replacement for Retribution because you don't check Death's Door or remove block. I put it in side grade instead of downgrade because you're still doing more base damage than Wanderer, but it's pretty close, especially in the late game. Sergeant is a poorly designed utility path. You lose major damage, and in exchange you gain move resist and can apply a dot resist to your party. Bolster also removes weak and Vaughn from self, but that's mostly irrelevant. The dot resist is kinda cool, but the relatively low RNG roll is no fair compensation for the massive damage nerf. Getting no additional taunt or sustain is stupid, both boring and bad. Definite overall downgrade from Wanderer, even behind Poet. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have the nerfed Vanguard, which is still an absurdly strong and boring buff. You gain 50% damage to Crush and Riposte, which are already your bread and butter, and 20% HP on an already beefy tank. You do lose dot resist, but that's largely an even swap with the HP. Not much to say here, it could still use an additional nerf, preferably with more interesting mechanics. Goes behind Ravager after the nerf, but just barely. Aspirin is a weird melee tank occultist build. It also tries and fails to make Anamnesis relevant. You gain a nice HP buff and block plus on combat start, along with 50% damage to your stabs. You lose debuff chance and resist, making you a pure stab and heal bot, a very poor man's surgeon. Anamnesis gets a fat damage buff, but still doesn't actually do damage considering how much unchecked power is required to activate it. Simple but powerful, it loses out on great status because it lacks diversity and utility. Clear upgrade, right behind Tempest. Ritualist is the utility path. You get a healing boost, a debuff chance boost, and the potential self-buffs with every curse you lose, the downside being a high chance at self-vuln every turn. The healing is still RNG, making it less relevant than PD's heal boosts, but the debuff chance is amazing since Occultist has the strongest debuff skills in the game. Unfortunately, being a utility character, they don't always utilize the random token buffs, and the Vuln makes this already squishy hero even more fragile. Still, the utility here is off the charts, and is still an obvious upgrade. Just a bit weaker than Aspirin and behind Alchemist. Warlock is the Giganuke path. You lose major HP in exchange for plus 50% range damage, and a chance to get free unchecked power every turn. Arguably the most fragile path in the game, especially with unchecked power burn. This is still a great path with insane scaling potential. Burning Stars is the best of all the nuke contenders because it hits any position and ignores block. Even when you're recharging your power, you can utilize Pull and Ceiling Spaghetti for still incredible damage. The only thing keeping this out of OP tier is being the most fragile path in the game. I put it right behind Rogue. Finally, the Runaway. Let's start with Arsonist. You gain a buff to burn application along with crit in exchange for a huge damage nerf and a chance to self-burn every turn. The damage is almost entirely irrelevant, since you'll want to be playing Firefly almost exclusively in a dot build. The crit is incredible here, allowing 2 additional turns of burn nearly guaranteed to be applied because of the buff. With how easily accessible burn scaling trinkets are, this is already the best dot hero in the game, made even stronger by a path. The self-burn can be scary with average HP, but a PD in your party can take all your worries away. Easily fits in the great tier, a step below Warlock. Next is Orphan. On the surface, a complex path that gives you more damage in front rank with less dot damage, and vice versa in the back rows, along with an HP nerf and self-crit with Firestarter. In practice, you always run this path on rank 4 and spam Firefly, hopefully with some powerful burn trinkets in tow. The base damage on Runaway is too low for any other play to be optimal. While the HP loss hurts, it's less relevant as a back ranker and nowhere near as bad as paths like Warlock, Alchemist, and Nightsworn. Dots are less reliable than straight damage, which just keeps this out of the OP tier, which it was in before the trinket nerf, and leaves it at the top of the great category. Finally, the list ends with a whimper with maybe the most boring path yet, Survivor. A pure upgrade, this path gives you a speed token and 2 dodges at combat start, along with a heal boost. Not much to say here, obvious upgrade tier, but nothing more than that because it doesn't really do anything spectacular. I put it right behind Intermezzo. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave your own tier list in the comments.